Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is an extreme grocery budget challenge. This is my very first one, so bear with me. Groceries are so expensive these days, so I'm kind of going back to the basics and making some cheap but delicious meals. I'm going to try to keep my budget somewhere around $30 and see just how many meals I can come up with. Now I'm going to head on over to Walmart and I'll see you back here in just a minute. And here is everything I came up with. I'll list all these items in my description box below. I did forget a bag of frozen mixed vegetables, so I did have to go back for that. But it never fails. I always seem to forget at least one thing when I go to the grocery store. So I'm just going to jump right in here. This first one is a Hashbrown breakfast type casserole. I'm using a 2-pound bag of the frozen hash browns, and I did reserve about 2 cups of those to use in another meal later on. I just added those diced potatoes to my large skillet. I also added 2 tablespoons of oil and a little salt and pepper. Oh, and I also added some nature seasoning. You don't have to cook these. I just seem to like it a little better this way versus putting them in there straight from frozen. I just tossed those around and let them cook for a little bit. And while those were cooking, I moved over to the counter to crack some eggs. I've got a dozen eggs here. Now whisk those very well and set them to the side. And I'm going to use a 9x13 baking dish for this. I did spray it with a little nonstick spray. Then I added in those hash browns. And if you want, you can brown yours up a little more than I did mine. I was just in a hurry this day. Now over those hash browns, I'm sprinkling a 4-ounce package of the real bacon pieces. I'm just going to be real. They're a lot cheaper than a pack of bacon these days. Now I'm adding on half a block, which is 1 cup of shredded cheddar cheese. Now I've got the beaten eggs, and I'm just pouring them right on in. And feel free to add a little milk or a splash of water to your eggs. I didn't add the milk only because I was trying not to add too many extras, but I should have added in some water. I just stirred that around a little bit. Then you'll want to bake this uncovered at 350 for 45 to 55 minutes. Or just until those eggs are set and this is completely cooked through. This is an easy and cheap breakfast idea, and it's a great one to meal prep for the week. You can top this with anything you like. For this next one, I had seen a recipe for unstuffed cabbage rolls. Let me tell you, I've been craving cabbage through this whole pregnancy. I diced up a whole head of cabbage, then I added it to my large Dutch oven. I poured in about 3 cups of water. I covered it and let that simmer. And while that was cooking, over in a separate large skillet, I added half a pound of ground turkey. And when I substitute turkey for ground beef in a recipe, I like to add in a little of the beef bouillon paste. It really helps to give it that beefy flavor. I also added in half a diced onion, and I'm just going to cook that and break it up until that turkey is cooked through. That turkey's done, and you can use a paper towel to soak up some of that grease if you need to. Now I'm adding in a 15-ounce can of tomato sauce, along with a 28-ounce can of Italian-style petite diced tomatoes. I gave this a good stir, and I let it sit here and simmer while that cabbage was cooking. Now I'm going to season up this sauce mixture. That's the best way to add flavor on a budget. I added salt and pepper, onion powder, garlic powder. This is optional, but I added in about a teaspoon of Worcestershire sauce. I always have this on hand, and just a little bit of this goes a long way, and it adds so much flavor. And I went digging through my spice cabinet to see what else I could come up with, and I added in some paprika. My cabbage had been simmering for about 45 minutes. I prefer to pre-cook it like this before I add it to the casserole dish. I'm just not a fan of the crunchy cabbage. I like it nice and tender. I did drain that. Now I'm adding it to a 9x13 inch baking dish. Then you'll want to spread that out into a nice even layer. Now I've got the ground turkey tomato sauce mixture here, and I'm just pouring it right on top of that cabbage. Now spread that out. And y'all, cabbage is one of my favorite vegetables. I just love it. I covered this tightly with foil, then I baked it at 375 for about 45 minutes. After that 45 minutes, I did take it out of the oven and remove the foil. Then I put it back into the oven and let it continue to bake uncovered for about another 15 minutes. Here it is out of the oven. This was another cheap but delicious meal. And I do want to let you know that my husband is not the biggest cabbage fan, but he tried this recipe and he loved it. This next one is Crockpot, Pinto beans, and Chorizo. I got everything started the night before. I'm using 1 pound of dried pinto beans. I poured them into my strainer and looked through them and made sure to pick out any rocks or bad ones. Then I rinsed them. I'm not sure if that's necessary, but I did it. I added them back into a large bowl with about 5 cups of water. These will swell up a little bit overnight, so you do want to make sure you have them in a big enough bowl. I just covered these with a little plastic wrap and let them sit out on the counter overnight. Then the next morning I uncovered them and then poured them into a strainer to get rid of that water. Then I set them to the side for just a bit so I could work on the chorizo. This was my first time ever having this, and I couldn't believe how cheap it was. It was a 9-ounce roll of pork chorizo. The recipe did say to brown it up in the skillet first, and it kind of wants to clump together, but as it cooks, it will start to break up, and that was half of a diced onion I added in there. Now you'll just let this cook until it's cooked through, and it was kind of hard for me to tell when it was done because I've never used it before. So I kind of had to guess at it, and it looked done to me. So I removed it from the heat. I added it right on into my crock pot, and I dumped in the grease and all. That really helps to flavor your beans. I poured in those drained beans. Now I'm adding in some seasonings, and I'll say it again, this is a great way to really kick it up a notch when you're on a budget. And just feel free to go crazy with these, except if you're using something like cayenne pepper. But honestly, just use the seasonings that you love here. I added salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, chili powder, and cumin. I poured in about 6 cups of beef broth. I always keep that bouillon paste on hand. Then I covered it and set it to cook on low for 10 hours. I did stir it a few times throughout the day, but y'all, this really smelled so good. These finished up a little bit before supper time. I gave them one last really good stir. I did have to taste them before I served them to my family, and they were delicious. So I covered them back up. I did make some rice to serve this over, but it would also be really good served over cornbread. Rice is a lot cheaper though, and it is a great way to really stretch out a meal, especially when you're on a budget. This dinner was a simple one, but it was absolutely delicious. The whole family loved it. And served along with that rice, you can really get a lot of servings out of this. This next one is just an easy vegetable soup. I had originally got this recipe a while back from Jennifer over at Southern Mama Drama, but I did change it up just a little bit for budget purposes. In my large Dutch oven, I browned up the other half of that ground turkey that I used from that Cabbage Casserole. I added a 28-ounce can of Italian-style petite diced tomatoes, a can of tomato soup, a 12-ounce bag of the frozen mixed vegetables. This is the beef bouillon paste that I always keep on hand, and I added in about 2 teaspoons of that. Also, a can of Great Northern beans, and I did not drain these. And for the seasonings, I added garlic powder, onion powder, paprika, and a little salt and pepper. But feel free to add any other seasonings you like here. You could also add in a couple bay leaves if you have those. Now I'm going to add in some water. I'm not doing broth here, only because I added the bouillon paste earlier. And that was a total of 6 cups of water I added in. I know that seems like a lot, but after we add in the last couple things, it won't be quite as soupy. I let it simmer for about 45 minutes. Then I added in those 2 cups of frozen diced hash browns that I saved from the breakfast casserole. I gave that a stir. And then for this last ingredient, I grew up having macaroni in my vegetable soup, so I added in just the noodles from this box of Great Value macaroni and cheese. Don't add in that cheese packet, we're going to use that in another meal. I just let this simmer here for about 15 minutes until those noodles were cooked through. And that is it. You can tell it really thickens up a lot. This is a very filling meal and it's delicious. We like to have this with cornbread, so if that's in your budget, feel free to make some to serve along with it. It's really easy to customize this to the way your family likes. Just make it your own. This last one is a meatless meal. It's a cheesy rotini pasta bake. I started out by boiling up 16 ounces of the rotini pasta according to the directions on the back of the box. When those were done, I drained them and then returned them to the stovetop. Now, do you remember that cheese packet I saved from that box of mac and cheese? I'm adding that to my pasta. I'm also adding in 24 ounces of spaghetti sauce. Then you're just going to mix that up until everything is well combined. And feel free to add in cooked chicken or ground beef to this, but I was on an extreme budget, so I did not. Anyways, I think it's good to have a meatless meal every now and then. As long as it tastes good and fills you up, that's all that matters. I poured that pasta into a 9 by 13 inch baking dish. Then I topped it with the other half of that block of cheddar cheese. Now this goes into the oven to bake at 350, uncovered, for 20 to 25 minutes, or just until that cheese gets nice and melted. This is just delicious, just like this, served by itself. Or you can add in some things you already have on hand. You could serve your favorite veggie on the side. This is such a simple meal, but it is so good. I really hope you enjoyed this video. You may also like these. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos, and I will see you in the next one.